So this might be our worst idea ever. This is Ryan Omega here at Life Action Roleplay, and yesterday, while I was hanging out at the Scabby Rooster studio, I was hanging out with our friends Nox and Fab, and Cyn and I were all together, and we realized between our schedules that we have very little time to record a new podcast, so Nox dared me to review one of my older podcasts. And when I started Life Action Roleplay with Cyn, I made certain decisions that once hearing these podcasts, I was saying, we can't let this out. This is just not good enough, or it would just seem really, really bad. But in the effort to listen to my own progress, our own progress rather, to see where we are now in Life Action Roleplay, I have to listen to where we were before when we created our actual first podcast, which I threw out because I was like, no, this is too embarrassing. So now I'm going to listen to this, and Nox said I should make comments. So let's see how that goes. And, well, there's no music so at the time, so we're just going to get right into it. Here goes. All right, and we're live. Welcome, everyone, to our podcast, Life Action Roleplay.
Woohoo!
With
Cynthia Marie
and Ryan Omega. And together we go by
Cyn
and Omega. Just be easier to remember.
Yeah, it's so much easier.
Okay, so first of all, it wasn't that I was nervous. It was because when we started doing this podcast, we kind of thought this would be a drink and talk about LARP stuff podcast. So we figured that drinking would ease our nerves. So now I just kind of sound really slow and weird. And we try to come up with names for ourselves. So it would be Cyn and Omega. And that's how we kind of started, because we thought that's what you kind of had to do with podcasts. We were also inspired by our friend Kristen, Kristen Barrick, who is the podcaster for Chimichanga Superstar. And he and his co-host usually just drink a lot and go off the cuff. So they're normally super funny, but that doesn't work for everybody. And this podcast is proof of it. Let's see how much more cringeworthy this becomes. And the name of our first podcast is LARP. What is it? For everybody who keeps asking us just what live action role-playing is, that's what the aim for this particular podcast is. But we're going to also divert into many other things, because it's going to be more of a conversation rather than a very strict, this is everything that you need to know about LARP. Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, so it's cool that we did maintain the trying to keep everything conversational vibe, because that is something that I strive for in this podcast. But it's interesting that how-tos, how to do something, is some of our most popular podcasts, like How to Be a Bard, or How to Do Politics, or How to Play a Noble. Those are some of our most popular podcasts. So we've changed direction based off of the feedback of what people found useful. But at the same time, we could still be conversational. So it's kind of cool that things have evolved partly or mostly because of audience feedback. Brought to you by our friends at Love and Justice, a Serious Sailor Moon podcast.
Woohoo!
So many of our friends from Love and Justice are responsible for helping us get started, helping us with tips on how to run a podcast. So we're grateful to them.
And thank you for being amazing podcast. If you haven't heard it yet, go listen to it now. It's awesome. Absolutely.
When you listen to these ladies, you kind of want to be their friends. That's kind of the podcast that we want to have. Ish. Like we're gonna have our own flavor. We are still figuring this out right now. Also, I want to give a special shout out to my friend Dave Wilson, who gave me this setup for this particular podcast. So there we go. Now brought to you by all of these lovely people who are our friends. Also brought to you by Mimosas.
Mimosas made with cranberry.
Woohoo!
Cheers.
Cheers.
Kampai.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we are going to intend to be slushes for all of these podcasts. We just kind of need something to loosen us up a little bit.
Because I'm shy.
I am also introverted.
Oh man, okay, lushes, not slushes, but I forgive myself because I've been drinking. But one of the things that we've always wanted to do too is always try to promote something or promote people that helped us or things that we find are really cool. Because if the podcast isn't a medium for helping promote other people, then why do it? So it's something that I always think of whenever we even think of guests. Like, what projects are they working on? Who has a point of view that they have to say? If it's just, I'd like to be on your podcast because I think it would be cool and I would like to just have a word and say things. It's like, that's important. But if you actually have a project, if you are a content creator, that's something that I generally tend to look at more, because content creators do need to help each other out, because it's really a whole community that gets people listening and working and getting all of those people to rise together. There's that whole idea of a rising tide floats all ships, and I sincerely believe that. And that is often a couple of the reasons why we end up picking the guests that we do for our podcast.
All right, let's kick this thing off, shall we?
All right, yeah.
Let's talk about this.
So we came up with this idea. Actually, Cyn was the one that bugged me to come up with this idea, thankfully.
Okay, so hold on. There is a full-on reason why. Is because I am a newbie at LARP. I have always loved the idea of it, but never wanted to do it until about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of talked to a whole bunch of people that I knew that LARP to help me through. So when you had talked about sparking the idea, I was like, hello, why aren't we giving people information on how to do this? So my experience is it's very minimal, but I think I provide a different outlook to the LARP experience versus you, right, who've been doing it for how long?
So I've been doing vampire LARPs since 2000, and buffer LARPs about 8 years ago. But if you count things like Model United Nations, which I didn't even think of as a LARP, but it makes perfect sense, then I have about 20 years of experience of LARPs and a lot to draw from. And LARP has definitely been one of those staples that has changed my life. And that's not to be preachy or let's convert you to it. It's just something I'm really, really passionate about.
Yeah.
So when Cyn said, "Why aren't we doing this?" I didn't even know that there would be some kind of that people would want something like this.
An audience, yeah, a niche. And it seemed like after we posted some stuff on our Facebook that it was something that people were very interested in. So here we are, recording a thing.
Yeah.
And hopefully y'all like it.
Yeah. And first off, to explain what LARP is, I think let's start off with, how did you get involved with LARP? You said 2 years ago. So what what dragged you into this monstrosity that we call LARP?
Okay, so long story short, I actually started role-playing online, doing Sailor Moon stuff on AOL. Wow, yeah, when AOL was a thing.
Thing.
How embarrassing. And so, you had to learn how to type really fast, and you had to learn how to do all the dice codes so that it, randomly rolled your dice, and you pray to God that your powers actually worked and not backfire on you. So I kind of moved on from AOL to like the whole MySpace world, where it became more paragraph role playing. Oh, Yahoo Chat too. So paragraph role playing versus like novella role playing, where you kind of started writing long-lived stories, and then I grew up and stopped going online.
So you wrote mini fan fictions.
I did write mini fan fiction from the point of view of one character, but life took place and went to college and started performing some more. So I got my degree in dance and performing, and it kind of just fell all into place when I started seeing everybody else start acting and LARPing, and I was like, hey, I guess I can sort of do that. I'm a performer. Like, I could probably handle it. So I actually did the, I think it was their Kickstarter video for By Night Studios. On the Queen Mary.
Yeah, for the the relaunch of Vampire the Masquerade with By Night Studios. Yeah.
Right. So excuse me. Oh wow, the mimosa's kicking in now.
Yeah, mimosas.
I jumped on and threw on a suit and became a Ventru. So that was kind of my first brush with it, and then kind of started getting into it. And my first actual real full LARP with storytelling and rock paper scissors, which I am king at rock paper scissors.
You are scary at rock paper scissors.
It's terrifying. Yeah, so I did that in Vegas for their Blood and Betrayal 2. That was my first time doing a LARP. And then after that, I was kind of hooked. I haven't done very much since. I went to the New Orleans Grand Masquerade, but I'm looking to kind of jump into the LA LARP scene as soon as possible. So you guys tell me which LARP I should go to, because I want to experience it all.
So it's super interesting that now Cyn does things like Sirens of the Realms on Maze Arcana and LA by Night on Geek and Sundry. And when we started this podcast, it was never really the intention of either of us nor Kai to start getting onto live streams. That's just something that we just happened to do with friends, because many of our friends were live streamers and performers, and we just happened to be lucky enough to want people to want to play with us. So it's interesting listening to this now with the aspect that she and I were involved with this thing with By Night Studios, which, by the way, is headed by Jason Carl, and that name should sound familiar. And then now here we are. I'm doing a Hollywood Forever vampire LARP, which had a bit of Jason's guidance, and Cynthia Marie is one of the main cast members of LA by Night. So it's really cool to see where we started and where we are now.
And we will also slowly work on experiencing it all together, because I have been to many of these LA LARPs, and including starting one.
What?
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah,
Which one? Talk to me.
Okay, so I guess let's start off with how I discovered LARP.
Right.
So I discovered LARP when I was at UC Berkeley, and I was their editor-in-chief of the anime club. Mm-hmm. So Cal Animage, go Bears! And one of my friends, Sarah, went to KublaCon to do a LARP. And we also knew that we're LARPers in the area, and it was funny how there's this hierarchy between nerd cultures.
Yeah.
So we were anime geeks, and they were LARPers, so we thought we were obviously superior to these people. So we would look at these LARPers like, what are you guys doing? You look silly. You're pretending to be vampires. Okay, whatever. Because nerd culture is all about acceptance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because there's no hierarchy there. We're all nerds. We're all equal. Like, go fuck yourself.
And then you have us comic book nerds who look at the anime geeks like, we're gonna be over here with these books.
Yeah, but we got hentai, bitch. Oh, that doesn't help.
No, doesn't.
No.
All right, I'm going to insert right here that I wasn't just an anime fan. I was a full-fledged otaku, and I guess nowadays you would call them weebs. But I was such an otaku that I published 2 anime trivia books, actual published, not the self-published, but it went through Stonebridge Press. So I actually had royalties for my books. I ended up speaking at a couple of libraries, and I was a guest of honor at FanimeCon and hosted the game show based off of You Don't Know Jack. So if you want to look this up, the information is horribly out of date. It's called the Anime Trivia Quiz Book, and it has a lot of my humorous take on anime questions. And, I mean, very rarely is a geek in isolation. If you're a geek in one thing, you're bound to be a geek in other things. So it's totally okay to love LARP and anime and sci-fi and D&D and all of these other things, and you might think, oh, those things are not way off. And yet, the strange part about nerd culture is that we do have this really invented hierarchy, and I think it's because we want to defend what we love from haters. And sometimes that means thinking that our nerddom is better than some others.
So, anyways, so then Sarah went off to Kubla Khan, did a LARP. She talked about how amazing that was, and we're like, okay, that's great. You know, you find you, you do you.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Then she wanted to go to the local LARP in the area. Sarah was one of those women that, you know, she wore big plaid shirts. She was not really, like, super social at first. Like, she was part of the anime crowd because, like, it was a group that she could gravitate towards. But when she came out going to her LARP, she wore this tight PVC dress, and we were like, "Oh my god, you have boobs!
What?
Where were these?" And she was like, she was not a small woman.
Okay.
Like she wore a very flattering dress.
She was curvy.
She was curvy.
Gorgeous.
Like, she was curvy and gorgeous, and we're like, what is this Sailor Moon transformation that just happened to you?
Woo!
And for her, she was just playing her character.
Moon Prism Power.
Exactly,
Okay.
but Moon Prism Power in PVC dress. So
Right.
she said that, you know, she's going to go do this LARP, and she asked if any of us wanted to do it. And I was just curious, what made her get into the mentality to look so drop dead gorgeous from a person who almost didn't care about the way she looked?
Mm-hmm.
She made a point to not care about the way she looked. But then that came out, and I'm like, what happened? I have to figure out what this is.
There's one other thing that I have to add here. I know that at the beginning of this first podcast that I mentioned that I was introverted, but when I was in the anime club, I was probably even more introverted, unless it had anything to do with the anime fandom. And so when I saw Sarah look that way, I was kind of thinking in myself, it's like, how do I become that? You know, I don't know how else to explain that. You know, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. Most of the clothes that I wore were things that I found at thrift stores that basically just covered my body. I didn't really give much care to, like, how things looked overall. If I liked a shirt, if it came from a convention which had a nice anime design, I wore that. A lot of my shirts used to be convention shirts. I was that kind of otaku. And it's interesting to see how an activity like LARP has changed the way I present myself and dress. And I just it was just a visual thing to see Sarah in that dress being gorgeous and beautiful and feeling it. And feeling it is not a thing that is easily described. It's just something that you know. And I knew that whatever she had, I wanted it. And that's why I jumped into my first LARP.
So I went as my first character was a ghoul. So not even a full vampire, a ghoul. So a servant to a vampire, and I wore a tuxedo with tails. I was the perfect little butler named Cesar, and that was my first. That was my first character at a LARP, and at that very first LARP, I was serving a elder Ventru, a Ventru elder in Oakland, and the Prince of San Francisco and his court decided, in an act of revenge, to kidnap his head ghoul. So my very first LARP was me getting kidnapped by an entire vampire court.
Okay, that's awesome.
So that's what dragged me into LARP.
That's awesome.
And then as for starting a chronicle in LA, so this group was part of a network group called One World by Night.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are vampire chronicles like all over the world where you can play that character, that same character, from San Francisco to Oakland to Washington, D.C. to Champaign, Urbana, and there are also places in Brazil where you get to play that same character.
Right on.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting concept, and there was not a Chronicle in Los Angeles at the time.
I see.
And so Kenny Lowell, who was a storyteller from DC, who moved out to LA, and I was in San Francisco. Like, some of us from San Francisco would come to LA to help start that Chronicle. I was his assistant storyteller for the LA game when he started it.
Nice.
So when I started that a long time ago, that was 2003 or 4?
Oh.
It was a long time ago, and that game still exists.
Hey, that is not a long time ago. I graduated high school at that point. Okay.
I now feel old.
Yeah.
I feel old, like a vampire. No, not like a vampire.
Not like a vampire.
Not like a vampire.
But just old.
Yeah, just yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yay! Salt and pepper facial hair for the win. So, so that's how we first got started.
So just for your information, this is the same Kenny Lowell. If that name sounds familiar to other people in the gaming world, he is one of the hosts for a podcast called Combat Phase, which covers a lot of miniature gaming. So if you want to know more about miniature gaming, just find Combat Phase. It's in iTunes and some other places. So it's kind of cool that now two of the people that founded the LA game, the LA Vampire game rather, are now doing podcasts in different arenas.
And one of the things that we can talk about is, if you have never played in the LARP, what should you do first? Or how do you even get started? I'm finding there's a lot of people who have no idea how to even get started in a LARP.
Well, how do you find a LARP? Let's start with that.
Usually, like these days, I usually find that within someone among my friend circles, someone is probably involved in LARP. But to be fair, I've been LARPing for 20 years.
Right. So someone like me who, I mean, I have a lot of people in my circle that LARP, but someone who's just starting may not have very many people in their circle. What's the best way to find it?
Well, usually the first thing to do is try to first ask among your friends. You may not have any idea who in your circles might be a LARPer. But it is starting to become more, I won't say commonplace, but it's more prevalent to the point where someone in your circles is most likely going to do it. In the case that it is not, if you look in your city, if you look in your city and you look up LARP, you will probably find something that you could probably go to. At least try to search within like 20, 30 miles of where you are.
Yeah.
Okay, so I sorely underestimated someone's ability to want to LARP. I keep forgetting that even back in classic Vampire, around the early 2000s, people drove 2 to 3 to 4 hours to go to a game because that's how much they want to go to game. And even now, I know friends who drive all the way from Vegas or all the way from Northern California to go to Twin Mass, which is in Southern California. I know people who go from Southern California to Northern California 5 or 6, 7 hours just to play a game. I know, because I'm one of them now. Well, Kai's game of DR NorCal is a pretty good game to drive 5 or 6 hours for. So, perspective is important. When I started doing this kind of advice, I just kind of thought, whatever's in your local area. But for some good games, you'd be willing to travel.
Yeah, like if you're in Los Angeles, if you're in a major city, you're gonna be able to find a LARP.
Yeah.
If you're in not a major city, look for colleges and look for college towns, because that's where live action role playing is going to be pretty prevalent.
Right.
So that's why I would start. And most people would be happy to have new players.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so just make a point to just contact that storyteller and say, hey, I'm completely new to LARP. I have no idea what I'm doing. Okay, maybe whatever you're comfortable telling them.
Of course.
Like, say that I'm interested in joining. What do I need to do? What do I need to bring? People are usually super supportive to be able to help a first-timer. Just because, like, they usually love this activity. And it's always fun to bring other people into the social circle.
Yeah.
So right now, I want to take some time to address one question I'm constantly asked, and that is, why is Hollywood Forever a closed LARP? And that's a LARP that I run with my friends Bruce and Joanna. And the main reason is because we're in a private residence. And when you're in a private residence, you are subject to the whims of, not whims, but like the responsibilities and duties of what that homeowner like tells you. And in this case, it's Bruce's place. So, uh, you don't want to have like too many people. And that's why it's a closed LARP. However, what's also kind of just happened is that a lot of people just like taking pictures from that LARP, and we love sharing and showing that to other people. So, if we ever get the opportunity to hold it in a venue that is open, that's public, that would end up being an open LARP. In fact, I know that we have discussed things like that.
So I know as a newcomer, it's actually very overwhelming to find out all the rules and processes and clans and all the hierarchies. Like, it's really overwhelming. So what is your advice for, like, I know what I would say to a newbie such as myself, but what would you say to someone who's probably entering a new LARP with all of that?
Well, if you're coming in with a friend, which is the best thing to do, if you have someone that you can come in with, I would say do a lot of shadowing with that new player. Just start by observing a little bit. Not be silent necessarily, but
Right.
just kind of like watch what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how to like interact with people, like get introduced to people in character. So do a little bit of that. Ask them. I guess start with that. Aside from that, like I think of, like if they have I am floundering because like there's like so many other things that I do in my head. Usually, I try to come up with my own plot if I know the world well enough. So if it's vampire, like I figure out a reason why I'm there, so I invent my own goal.
So, after having done 40 episodes of this podcast, I would not have given the same advice as I did in this very first podcast. So, shadowing now wouldn't be like the greatest idea. You're not trying to be a helicopter parent, but what would help people if you're new is to at least develop some relationships out of character, some ties that allow them to have someone to interact with if they need to, and then come back to you. And that's if you're coming in with a friend. And the idea of coming up with an internal goal is fine if you understand the world, but when you're coming into a whole new world, that's not useful to you. So at that point, try to make the point to try to be helpful to other people and help other people with their ideas is probably one way to go about doing things. And then you'll be able to kind of find ideas and goals and even aspirations on your own after being involved with a few different mods and a few different role plays. That will give you some level of experience to kind of see where you want to go and see what's interesting and fun for you.
Yeah.
For being there.
Well, I would say for a new person, I know what helped me. My first LARP was actually latching on to a very prominent character in the storyline. So that was a really good experience for me because I got dropped into having to figure it out rather than shadowing completely somebody. Like, so I was shadowing him. Like, I followed him around and kind of understood, and he would pull me aside when like no character was around and kind of talk me through what was happening. But immediately when we were back in like with people, I would stand by his side and kind of listen. And yeah, I got tracked down a couple of times, so I ended up actually hanging out in the shadows for quite some time, which was very interesting, being in an all black dress in Vegas sitting in the shadows. Apparently I was being looked for about 45 minutes by I forgot what clan it is. They're like the architect type people, or not architect,
Like, not Ventru.
not Ventru. No.
Are they one of the pillar clans from the Camarilla?
I don't know if they're Camarilla or not. Oh, I could see his face. I just can't remember the name right now.
Okay, I'm going to go through random clans and figure, okay, is it a Nos?
Nope.
Setite?
Nope.
Giovanni?
Nope.
Ravnos?
Nope.
Tremere?
Nope.
Toreador?
Nope.
Malkavian?
No.
Timizi?
No.
Bruja?
No. Although she was looking for me too.
Okay. Toreador?
No. Oh. What?
Asimite?
No.
Like, what clans have I not named?
I need to
Malkavian?
No, you already said that. You're like obsessed with Malkavians. You realize.
I like playing Malkavians. They're fun.
Who did the trackers? It's not Asimite. Who are other trackers?
Gangrels!
There you go.
Oh my goodness. Feel so ashamed that I forgot. Not that ashamed, but...
Well.
Okay, so now you've seen how very new Cyn was to Vampire when we started this podcast about a year and a half ago. And, you know, it's so cool to see how much Cyn has grown as a role player and as a LARPer. Again, in the various vampire games, one in La Sangre, and then also in my home game, Hollywood Forever, where she plays a La Sombra for me, and on LA by Night. And for those who might kind of dig at her by saying, well, you didn't really know about the Camarilla or anything about Vampire until a year and a half ago, that's awesome. That means that she loved the characters that she played so much that she made an effort to learn, and to have that recognized by Jason Carl and by Geek and Sundry and White Wolf is amazing. That means that regardless of when you start, it's not about the credibility of having done this for a long time. It's about people recognizing the passion in what you do. So, go Cyn.
So yeah, apparently I was being tracked by a gangrel for about 45 minutes. It actually couldn't find me for a better portion of the game.
Wow, such horrible
And
sniffing.
apparently he looked dead at me, and he was like, it was as if you were shadow bending, because I literally could not find you. I was like, that's kind of cool.
That's cool.
I'm okay
Like,
with this.
real-
I was real shadow bending.
Real life obtenebration for the win.
Yeah. So it was fun. I had a good time. My second LARP was a little bit more difficult because I wasn't fully tied in. So I had to make my own presence known. And thank God I had like other good friends that I was like, can I, like before the game, I was like, can I get like a group of people who like will work with me because I want to cause some havoc. So I got 4 different people, 4 different types of vampires, and one of them was a Bruja. He was a Bruja elder, which was kind of fun to play with. So I ended up just finding a chair, and I sat there the entire night. I was completely away from the regular La Sombra clan, because they were meddling in other stuff, and I was like, I am going to try my hardest to mess up all of their plans. that was my game of the night, and we did not succeed fully, but I did get something that they wanted. But it was fun. It was fun to cause a little bit of havoc. So I spent a good portion of the night just kind of sitting there and trying to understand the power structure of the room.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The other thing that I just realized as you were speaking was, in order to like learn about the world, is if you are a part of a clan, if you are a Malkavian, if you are a Bruja, like hang with your clanmates, have them tell you what's going on, and maybe they also have places where you can help them. The quickest way to get really involved is do something or help somebody do something.
Yeah.
And that automatically makes you feel included. In a case where there's a game where there isn't a lot of that kind of inclusion, or you're the only Inuit in your tribe.
Right.
When you're trying to do something, I try to think of icebreakers that would be social enough that doesn't have to do anything with the story, but would be something where you can start playing an activity and then break the ice, talk to someone, and then start learning a little bit more about plots. Like, since I know I joke that I'm introverted, but I really have been very introverted before doing LARP.
Okay.
And so LARP actually brought me out of my introversion, or at least gave me mechanisms on how to deal with a lot of people socially that I don't know. And because otherwise I'll get anxiety otherwise. So that is definitely another episode that I want to cover, because that's a whole like strategy.
Okay, so even though we've never actually done a LARP episode for introverts, I still kind of want to do one, but a lot of those strategies and techniques were already covered in the episode where we talked about LARP experiences, specifically for people who are veterans, helping people who are newbies. So a lot of making people comfortable into a LARP scenario is a combination of veterans and experienced players making newbies or new players comfortable or giving them an in to roleplay, as well as having techniques and strategies for people who are shy or not able to really uh, know where to jump in. And a lot of it really is just trying to find the common ground in which you can find your own role playing experiences with others, because that's what LARP is. Not you necessarily in being a hero or protagonist in this great world, you forming relationships with other people to get things done or to tell a wonderful story together.
But aside from learning from your clanmates, I sometimes the easiest thing to do is bring a deck of cards.
That's smart.
Or if you have that ability, bring a deck of tarot cards. That bringing a deck of tarot cards, I have seen do wonders and cause so much drama, in character drama,
Interesting.
at a game.
Yeah.
Or like some dice, some. There's a lot of things that you can bring.
So let's talk a little bit quick game mechanics for somebody who's brand new. So
Yeah.
obviously tabletop role playing versus live action role playing. Tabletop, you typically use your dice, whatever sided dice, to kind of control said action or decisions that are happening. But in LARP, you clearly don't have that ability to do that. So we talked about rock paper scissors and totally killing rock paper scissors. That is a game mechanic that is often used to make other power decisions. Is there anything else that you've ever seen be used other than rock paper scissors?
Well, in vampire or parlor game LARPs, where you're not doing actual fighting, usually it's rock paper scissors. Sometimes I've seen people draw cards.
Oh.
So, like the higher value tends to win. I've seen that in a game that I played about a month ago at someone's birthday party. So instead of having the rock paper scissors mechanic, they had like a playing card mechanic, and if you were a certain tribe or a certain clan, you actually certain cards would almost acted like a trump card and defeat the
That's a really random way of doing it. I like rock paper scissors because my personal power, like I'm really good at reading people, so I can kind of gauge what that person's gonna pick. I mean, I won't tell you my whole secret on how I play rock paper scissors. However, it's easier to read somebody and try to figure out rock paper scissors rather than leaving it completely to chance with a card.
Yeah.
That would suck.
Yeah, like I think the other way is that the LARP that we haven't addressed, which is buffer LARPs.
What's that?
So the LARPs where you go out into the woods and then you fight with foam swords.
Oh.
So the ones that people talk about whenever they think of LARPs, they usually think of going out into the woods, beating like random other people with foam swords, lightning bolt with like spell packets. That's the other type of LARP that people think of. So resolution is usually educated by how well you do, but it's also defrayed by calling out skills that you have or your character would have that you as a player would not have. So if your character was good enough to parry that blow, you would call out parry. So it was as if your character parried that blow. But otherwise, what's interesting about those LARPs is that it really is based off of your actual ability. So if you're not good with a sword,
you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, you're kind of screwed, but you could also get better with a sword.
Okay.
There are people who can learn what weapons they're good at. Like, I'm decent with a sword, I'm killer with a spear. With a long polearm weapon, I'm really, really good.
Okay.
Some people are good at sword and shield. Some people are really good chuckers of spell packets. They could beam them right in the balls. Fireballs!
Oh. I have a feeling I might actually be good at that, 'cause I play darts, so I'm pretty good at aim.
Yeah, so like as long as you don't dart them in the face, You
Sure.
know, yeah, like no one wants to get hit in the face.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I won't beat anyone in the face.
Okay. We'll say you gave it your honest try. Like
Oh, my honest try.
your honest try.
Okay, it took many months before we were able to get Cyn out to a buffer LARP. In fact, that particular podcast is covered under Lex and Cyn's first buffer LARP, where they talk about their experiences in Twin Mask. And Cyn finally got the idea to even roleplay in Twin Mask when John and Angela Bassett from Twin Mask were guests on this podcast. And it was actually maybe the fourth or fifth podcast where we talked about relationships and in-character couples, of which John and Angela are a married couple, and they met through LARP. And it's so interesting to see where Cyn is now with Twin Mask, and I'll allow her to tell you what she's doing at Twin Mask now, because once she does tell you that, it becomes really significant in where she is in terms of how she is involved with LARPs. I'm not going to say how right now. That will be an update for a later time.
Okay, so wait, spell packets. Are they like, what are they?
So spell packets represent your projectile spell. So like a fireball, a lightning bolt, but they're essentially like almost like beanbags, and they're very, very cheap to make. So if you're talking about you want to have like a projectile weapon, but you're worried about like the cost of owning a sword and making a foam sword, like spell packets are easily made with just rice and cloth and rubber band.
Oh.
That's all that is. And then you throw it, and then if it hits your target, then the intended effect takes place, whether it's damage, or some people get stunned, or some people get poisoned, or in the case of my character from Death Mask, some people die.
Oh my god, I did not just say Death Mask instead of Twin Mask. Oh my god. Okay, I must have been slushed. But, okay. Wow. Alright, moving on.
Oh, I am so down. Give me some beanbags.
Some
Got this. I got this. I'll be a healer.
I know, like, Sarah mentioned that she was so worried about going to a game like Twin Mask because she is very fight trained.
Yeah.
And she said, if you give me a sword, I will accidentally pummel them to death.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, though that's true, because you are a military brat in the nicest of terms, not an actual brat, but a military brat. But she's afraid of actually...
And she's stunt trained.
Yeah, so she's afraid of just knocking someone's head off. It's like, no, just use spell packets.
Yeah.
Because even if you try to check them hard, it's like, it's rice. You get hit with rice.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to die from getting hit with rice?
You'd be surprised. Have you seen weddings?
It's like, let's get you fertile. Let's throw all of the rice. I have no idea how that even started.
I do want to dispel a rumor right now, just based off of that part of the podcast, that if you are stunt trained or fight trained, you can adjust your fighting style when you're in a LARP. You're not encouraged to hit as hard as you can or check your blows to the point of damaging someone for real. There are places where you can do fight practice. I know there's one in North Hollywood Park, and there are some safety orientations that happen in a few different LARPs that tell you how to pull your blows, how to aim, where to fight, and they often encourage light touch. There are some LARPs that have heavier fighting, like Amtgard, as well. But I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't want people who do have that kind of training to feel like they can't do a LARP because of that. You can adjust yourself. If you can adjust yourself for a fight, and if you can adjust yourself for stunts, you can definitely adjust yourself for a LARP.
But, it's a thing.
I'm curious. I want to get better before Twin Mask. We're going to have to do, like, a mini LARP.
There are some places, like some of my friends do training. Do training. Yay, Mimosa.
We need more.
We need more. They do training Specifically so they can get better at LARP. And some people do it as a form of exercise. Actually, that's what I do when I work out. I actually take a heavy bar and I do sword training with it.
Cool.
So, so I do these sword exercises, and I just have one of these heavier bars that I got from Tony Swanton.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes I will, if I feel like it, I will take the stunt sword that I got from Tony, and I will use that.
I have so many swords from Tony.
I have the one sword from Tony, but it has his mark on it, so I keep it forever.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have almost a full collection from Tony.
That's true. Like, I think you collect swords and clothes.
Yeah.
All the clothes.
All of the clothes. Hey, a girl's got to costume herself, you know?
I know, but you do this well. I keep saying do.
You knew our mimosas.
In my mimosas.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Mimosa break.
Mimosa break, okay.
As I mix things here.
Alright, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the sound effect of more mimosas being made if you... I don't know if the...
Oh, yeah. Do you hear that?
More mimosas are being poured. Okay, so going back to our topic of the hand, like your first LARP. Is there anything else that we do want to do?
We want to do?
No, we don't want to do on them. It's just my brain just thinks in this really strange grammar pattern.
So let's talk the role of the storyteller. So there's that's always the interesting switch, at least for me. Again, being relatively new to this world, spotting the storyteller out of the crowd and trying to figure out how the hell to utilize a storyteller.
Oh, that's actually probably one of the easier things. And it depends on where you go. In a buffer LARP, usually they will wear a headband to indicate who they are.
Mm-hmm.
In a vampire LARP, usually they will make the out-of-game announcements to start off with, hey, we are the storytellers, so you need to come to us for any of these things. And depending on the size of the LARP, if you have a LARP about 30 people, you will figure out who these storytellers are right away.
Yeah,
and other players will refer you to them. If you have a crowd of about 100, they need some indicator because you won't be able to figure out otherwise, unless they're playing an NPC, at which point they probably don't want to necessarily
storytell.
Yeah, like they're storytellers, but they're also NPCs, and sometimes they want to be only the NPC.
Yeah.
In order to move that plot, but at the same time, it's weird if they're in the middle of a scene and you have to stop them to ask them something.
Right.
But usually, in a game that large, they will usually have more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite storyteller is my good friend Jimmy Reckett. Oh my god, he helped me so much in my first LARP because I had no idea how to use my powers. So he sat down with me for a good maybe 5-10 minutes in the middle of the game because he didn't have a whole lot of action that was happening at that precise moment. So he looked at my character sheet and he was like, oh, you could do some really cool stuff and you can do this, you can do that. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about here. So he told me about erasing somebody's memories. What is that particular power
Forgetful
called?
mind?
Yeah.
Under dominate? Yep.
Yeah, so being a little Sombra, it was a very interesting moment when I had a character walk up to me, probably one of my best character moments to date. I had a Carpathian walk up to me and ask me for a piece of the chess piece that they were looking for in their game. And I looked at Jimmy, and he kind of gave him the look of should I do what we were just talking about? And he's like, do it, go. And I was like, okay, all right. So, tell me your most fondest mortal memory. And the player actually went out of character, so I crossed his fingers, put a hand ahead, whatever the symbol is. Mm-hmm. And he asks me, he was like, why do you want to know? Is it you just want a story, or is there a particular reason? I was like, just give me your best story, whatever you want to tell me. So he's like, okay, So he goes back into character, and he tells me this whole long story of his mortal wife and how much he loved her and that he cherishes all the memories that he has with her and blah, blah, blah. Just goes on. He's super animated, and I'm sitting here out of character mind being like, oh, God, what is Jimmy going to make me do to this guy? Okay, here we go. So the guy's ending his story, and I look at Jimmy, and he was like, do it. And I was like, all right, forgetful mind. And he was like, what? And he was like, wait, no. Willpower move. So we rock, paper, scissored, and as you guys already know, queen of rock, paper, scissor, beat him down, like, easily. And he was like, no, again. So he spends another I think it's willpower point or blood point. Willpower starts changeling. Good Lord, I'm, like, mixing things together here.
No, it will be willpower for a retest.
Right, okay, great.
Yeah.
And so he spends another point, and rock, paper, scissors, queen again, nailed it. And he was like, shit.
Oh.
Okay. So I took his fondest mortal memory ever and walked away from him. It was the most devastating in-character move I have ever done. I felt like such an asshole for a good, 10 minutes. But yeah, Jimmy really helped me with that because I would have never known to have done a move like that. So ever since, everyone's kind of backed off of my little somber character. She's a little scary at times. Yeah, and then I remember again winning rock paper scissors with this guy who. This actually really infuriated me, and I think a lot of people are going to be pissed off about this story. But this LARPer, I forgot what kind of vampire he was, nor does it really matter at this point. He tried to challenge me to kiss him. And...
what, actually out of character kiss him?
In character.
Okay.
In character, tried, and right. I was having none of it. I, already, walked away once, and he was like, willpower, and I was like, what? So I had to test wits with him, strength with him, and again, thank God I'm a rock, paper, scissors queen.
Right.
Killed him on it, and then he retested again, and I think I went through 3 times of doing it before he let go of my hand. And I was like...
That is not okay.
That's not cool. Jimmy was really upset about it. He was not happy to find out that happened to me.
Yeah, that's...
But I was able to handle it. There was nothing horrible happened to me. It wasn't like I was cornered somewhere. It was out in the open.
Right.
It was just a very strange encounter. That's all. So
again,
that wasn't my first LARP. So I went from stealing somebody's epic memories to trying to fend off a kiss here. It was kind of a little weird.
I know. It's just in my head. That's just not okay because with LARP, the wonderful thing about LARP is that we can come into this world being who we want to be or the character that we want to play. Mm-hmm. So I think of all live action role playing as this consent of which you say that you are this character and I say that I'm this character and we both agree that this world setting is this world setting.
Yeah. And
that's the foundation for all the things that we play. So when you get a scenario where someone's trying to, force a kiss on you, a character, it just makes me squick.
Yeah.
Because it's that's not okay. And there's there's a whole... I know one of the episodes that people did want us to cover at some point is, some of these themes. What do you do in those themes? Mm-hmm. And the idea of consent.
Right.
Just to let everyone know, how to play in-character relationships, which is our episode dealing with consent, is one of our most popular episodes on live action roleplay. In fact, at the time of this recording, it is the second most popular. Our first most popular is how to play high charisma characters. And again, it goes to people liking a lot of our how-to episodes and finding some value out of them. But the how to play an in-character relationship podcast is probably one of the episodes that I'm most proud of that we covered on this podcast.
Right.
When it comes to role play, because that's a huge issue.
And also staying in character too. And if it gets too out there and you're not comfortable with it, then how do you get out of character and you tell that person no? But we'll
Yeah.
cover that at another point.
We'll
But
cover that in
I think for the moral of the story, like it wasn't a horrible situation. I was able to handle it in character. I was totally fine. In fact, I pulled away actually pretty quickly because I was on my way to the little ladies' room, in which case I was like, I gotta go. Like, I'm sorry, I can't sit here and keep beating you at rock paper scissors. Like,
I'm sorry, I have a bladder that's more important than you.
yeah,
So,
pretty much.
Yes.
But yeah, no, my first LARP experience was overall like an amazing experience. Like I can't thank By Night Studios enough for bringing me in to the LARP world and understanding it all. And yay
LARP! Yeah, I think because you mentioned your favorite storyteller, it's like it's really hard for me to pick one. Like I could easily go with my favorite storyteller that I've worked with, which would be Kenny, because what's interesting about the way Kenny and I work together is that we would come up with all of these backgrounds, and this is for La Sangre, the Los Angeles Chronicle. So basically, the idea was that it was a lot of Kenny's creative vision, but I was there to assist and be a sounding board because I was already a head storyteller for San Francisco. I could not do both. At the same time, Kenny lived in Los Angeles and I lived in San Francisco. So I didn't want to do both. And his vision was definitely, he called it like the East Coast player mentality, which was, like, I guess everyone in the East Coast had this thing about them. In this case, all the characters in LA had the ability to eat food, which is normally a merit that you buy. All of these characters in Los Angeles had took extra fire damage because they're all plastic.
What?
It was just, for me, it was like interesting flavor. In the West Coast, like, we don't play like that. In the East Coast, they always had something, like some little flavor that they had that made their character distinct.
Interesting.
So in my head, it's like, okay, this is cute. So I went along with it. But what was great about having Kenny as a storyteller is that we would plan all these things. And then just before we would start role-playing with all these people, we would throw all of it out the window. And we would go with whatever plots were actively happening. And if something happened that... if something happened that either Kenny didn't agree with or I didn't agree with, usually I rolled with whatever, then we figured out a solution like as we were rolling along. So we would storytell, go out there, we would check with each other once every hour. It's like, hey, what's going on with your storyline? This. What's going on in my storyline? This. So all the plots were always current.
That's cool.
Like every hour. And then we just kept rolling and just kept monitoring what was going on. So we were not playing in two separate, like... So people were not doing the mommy-daddy thing where they said, well, one storyteller told me that I can have this. And we're like, no, because we talked.
Right.
So, like, in terms of being able to coordinate stories with, Kenny would be my guy.
I'm listening to this right now, and it's just kind of funny that the storytelling method that I used with Kenny in the original La Sangre about, I want to say 15 years ago, is what I use on my show Blank Slate with my fellow storyteller CW Fox. But instead of checking on every hour, we're checking on every scene. And we're doing it every time I'm meeting with CW off stage or whenever we're talking together. We're just trying to make sure that our storyline is current while this is all being live streamed on a LARP. So it's super interesting that I've been doing this for a while, but I'm now doing this much faster and more instantaneous. It's also the reason why I have CW Fox as a storyteller with me. There's not a lot of people that can do what CW does immediately on stage, live on camera. So I really value what CW Fox has to offer, and I couldn't do this show without his assistance. So yeah, I'm just it's just weird how all of this is coming full circle.
In terms of a storyteller that allowed me all the things that I thought would be fun and awesome to play with would be John Bassett of Twin Mask. So When he started Twin Mask, he was trying to think of like all of these concepts, and he came up with this idea of uh, a land that was kind of based off of Venice, and full of rich people and masquerade and way too much money, and it just appealed to me for certain reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see why.
I can see why.
Well, the reason why, to let you in on the inside joke, is because Cyn and I had been involved with the Labyrinth Masquerade for many years, which is based off of the masquerade scene from the movie Labyrinth, but has then been inspired by the Venetian Carnival. So, since Dace in Twin Mask is inspired by Venice, that's why we kind of both laughed about it.
And I do remember like just talking to him very early about like all of these character, like I guess playing a noble. And at one point he had thought of like if you needed to play like a prince of like that world, it would cost like this much, and I was willing to pay that. And then he realized, well, like based off of all of the game balance, like we can't have you play this, but we'll have you play noble. It's like, okay, sure. But we talked a lot back and forth before that first game started. So by the time the first game started, like my very first line from when our characters woke from the dead, because in Twin Mask it's interesting, like everyone has actually died once, and they somehow appeared in this land. So it was a very interesting mechanic. And then I woke up, and the very first thing I said in the middle of like 40-degree weather in rain, because that was the very first game of Twin Mask, was, "This is the worst party ever." And then everything went on from there.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. I think we covered a lot of ground here.
We did. We went, like between Mimosas, being excited this is our first podcast.
Yay.
And yeah, we did cover a lot of ground. And I think with some of these things, we'll cover this in detail. And we're definitely open to feedback on what things you want to hear more of. I know that there's going to be some things that we did talk about that we just barely grazed, and then we will cover more in detail.
Yep.
And we are also planning to have like some guests come along.
Yay.
So we're going to have like more than just us having mimosas or whatever drink we find appropriate.
Right. For that time.
So
considering we are recording the daytime mimosas seemed the most appropriate.
Right. Yeah, so daytime mimosas before we head out to a party.
Yay,
Parties. So yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening. We appreciate all constructive criticism. I always use those words.
Right. Contact information. You guys should email us if you have any questions, or find us on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah,
we're getting those set up shortly, right?
Yes. So yes, we'll
Life action roleplay.
Life action roleplay. I love that name.
Thank you for joining me as I look back on our very first actual podcast. And I gotta say, I didn't cringe as hard as I thought I would. I thought we could be laughing at some of our mistakes, that we made a lot more mistakes. And I think it turns out, from what I remember, that this just wasn't a very strong episode to start with. And the very first episode that we did launch on the podcast was actually our second episode. And that was Cyn's idea, where we did an online quiz on what Camarilla clan were we in Vampire. But want to thank our Patreon supporters, especially Erin Ludlow, Treasure Kalafa, Twin Mask, Geeky Tees, and especially Talon Hack Bowler. Thank you for joining us on this retrospective, and I have a Facebook page now where I put all of my gaming related stuff. So if you want to like that, that would help me a lot. It is Ryan Omega under the Facebook page. And you'll see posts of this podcast, and you'll see more development things from Blank Slate and the other projects that I'm working on. Tune into Blank Slate, which is Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Scabby Rooster. And again, thank you. We wouldn't be here without you. So until next time, bye!